Hello and welcome to Creative Cut Talks, the show that aims to promote sustainable visual arts and to bridge the gap between art creators and consumers. As you go through life, don't you ever get confused by the many different terms artists use to describe where you can view their art? Don't you ever wonder why the places are different in the first place? I'm your host, Chawa, and before we get to the order of the day, let me share a little inspiration of why we decided to do this episode. So a few years back when I got my house, I got questions as to why I went for the size of the house I chose and if I wanted a partner to share with. And my answer was, I want to make one of the rooms a studio and use the rest of the walls to hang works in progress and display finished works. They got the rationale at the time, but about a year later, I got questions as to whether I was being dishonest or my goals are still in the pipeline. Let me say, I spent a few moments explaining the difference between a studio and a gallery, which is why today, recording from this studio of mine, we are going to play a definition of some terms and share the purpose of these setups. Well, the truth is, there will always be overlaps with regards to these houses, but the essence is we can attempt to explain the differences. I must say, what they all have in common is that they house art for whatever period need be, and in all of them, artworks may be displayed and may be sold as per owner's choices. Let's start with the one we just mentioned, an art studio. This is basically an artist's workroom. Artists prefer different workspaces for different reasons. I, for example, need a studio in my place of residence to avoid commuting late night when an urge to create sneaks in. Other artists enjoy outdoors or studios away from where they stay, while some prefer studios with a view, for example, a loft. A number of artists use their studios as a point of sale, and as such will strategically select a work area in an art district or a part of a city that has influx of their target market. You see, right here, this is where the first overlap of a studio and a gallery is. And it is no surprise those people ask me if my goals are delayed. In one breath, let us share the difference between a gallery and a museum. At its conception, a gallery was a long, narrow passage in a building or a room where artworks were displayed. As collections grew and art started becoming more accessible, we saw birth of buildings dedicated solely to housing art, and they were called museums. The terms art museum and art gallery may be used interchangeably, where art gallery, an architectural term by the way, refers to any display room of whatever size or shape, while a museum has a distinctive function of preservation of the arts and their historic and aesthetic value by maintaining a collection of valued works. In many instances, museums have long-term displays and a gallery side where temporary exhibitions and shows take place. Galleries are varied. We have non-profit and commercial galleries, then we have pop-up galleries, galleries within an art district, primary market galleries, and secondary market galleries. In both museums and galleries, works may be sold and also may be sold on auction, which then takes us to auction houses. Historically, auctions were used to sell assets of people who needed to dispose them, as well as to liquidate the assets of those in debt. Auctions took place in many different facilities, including open public spaces. As entrepreneurs saw a niche, they established auction houses, some specific to the products they auction, where they would actively assume collectibles and organize auction shows. As business grew, some established structures where exhibitions and art shows would take place for the purposes of selling artworks, and some pieces were auctioned. So in essence, we then had buildings dedicated to selling auction collectibles, and of course before you sell, you have to exhibit and have an opening show. As we may see now, in all these structures, art is exhibited for however long. In some countries, art exhibitions are also called art shows, but mostly shows may refer to short-term exhibitions that are usually accompanied by an event where performances and organized guests attend. To exhibit, or let's say, to curate an exhibition is an art on its own, but at its fundamental level, it entails display of work. To understand where to go for an art attendance, I will share this. Museums are mostly visited for educative and tourism purposes, where people mostly go with their families, friends, and partners. They may be perceived as a heritage preservation site and as such are frequented by academics and art professionals as well. Galleries, on the other hand, are mostly visited solo unless it is an art show according to statistics. This is because they are said to represent a safe space for reflection and reconnection. Depending on the type, galleries are where you can purchase your artworks. Art exhibitions, art shows, art markets, art fairs, and art districts are never short of the social element and may be a great place to unwind and hang out. Let me close the show by asking you to let us know which kind of art speaks to you.
Creative Cut, filling the creator-consumer gap.